Question.
One of the things that you mentioned was doing the research in those the birth records on Ancestry. Are there other things you've noticed that are different about the way you're researching kind of in this modern digital age?
In researching generally, yeah, you can do things so much more quickly, and on the whole that's a good thing. And you can do things that would have taken you weeks or months years ago when I started back in the pre-digital age. Now, do I want to go back to the old days? No, I do not. There is no merit in spending 3 weeks doing something that you can now do in 30 seconds. There's always a small downside though, that when you had to do it the hard way and just look through lists, big paper lists of names, or scroll through pages and pages of census, because there weren't very many indexes, you just had to look through a place. It forced you to look at things that you weren't actually looking for, and whether you liked it or not, you absorbed a certain amount. So that's a downside, that you don't do that anymore. But there is a compensation. Because you're not spending ages looking at stuff that you don't really want to look at, it means that you've got more time to do what I call just step aside and smell the flowers. When you found what you want, don't, take your goggles off, take your blinkers off, have a look at, if it's a page of census, have a look at the neighbours, have a look at some other pages, see what other people were doing, because your ancestors didn't live in isolation. You can do a nice pedigree chart, but if it's only got names and dates on it, it's quite an interesting thing to look at. It's quite decorative, but it's no more useful than one of those mobiles that you hang over a baby's crib. It's just things dangling from other things, and they've got no relation to each other. So if you look at the context, if you look at where people were, and look a little bit more widely, you get much more of a feel of what their lives were like. And the downside, I said, was that you're not forced to look at the things you don't need to look at. But the upside is you can then look at things that are a bit of a long shot. Now, nobody in their right mind would plough through pages and pages and pages and pages of passenger lists, unindexed passenger lists, in the hope that there might be something there that's interesting. But if it's it's a bit of a long shot, but it'll only take me 30 seconds to find it or not find it, you might as well go for it. So you find lots of things that you weren't particularly looking for, or you do a really stupid hit and hope search, and it brings fantastic dividends. And I had one, and it's one of the best things I ever did. I have a fantastic photograph of my grandfather's grandparents. Sweet old couple. We thought they'd never moved from the east of Scotland. They were born and brought up in Fife and Forfar, and all their children were born there, and they married there, and they died there. What I didn't know was that in the middle of their very long lives, they lived well into their 80s, they spent 13 years farming in Minnesota. And the reason I found this out was I was trying to trace forward, see what happened to all of their considerable number of sons, and one of them I hadn't found him, and I think, well, we're Scottish, of course we emigrate, so he probably emigrated or something. Anyway, I was doing one of these, I know, let's go to Ancestry, do an exact search, big fan of exact searches, put in his full name and do a search everything everywhere, and he had a fairly distinctive name because he had a middle name, which was unusual for the time. His name was Robertson Donaldson. So I put this name in, search everything everywhere, one single solitary hit. There are more now, but at the time, one. And it had his exact date of birth, so I thought this is beyond coincidence, it has to be the same man. But what he was in, he was born in 1872, was a draft card for the First World War. And I thought, that's very interesting. When I looked into it, and I looked at passenger lists, which are indexed, census, including American census, what I was able to piece together was that this couple, with their two youngest sons, of whom he was one, had set off to America, and they farmed in Minnesota. The old couple, they were in their 50s, which as far as I'm concerned now is an infant. But after, I think maybe it was the 13th Minnesota winter that did it, they decided to go back to Scotland. But the two sons stayed behind. Sadly, they didn't, neither of them had any children that I'm aware of, so I have no distant cousins in America from that line. But that was just the thing. I never, ever would have found that if I hadn't done this. Let's do a silly search and see what happens. So I'm quite happy with that. And I think that probably compensates for the stuff that you don't now do. So yeah, I'm happy with that.
I love that.